Hey there yogis, welcome to your post-workout, most likely post-run stretch. I have everything nearby. I have a blanket, a strap, and a block, so you can grab those things if you have them nearby. And then meet me on your mat. So after you've done a workout, and in particular a run, we've already usually fatigued the legs as much as we need to in a day, right? It's also a little good for the body, challenging your muscles. So we don't really need to do a lot more for the legs. Stretching definitely will come into play, but we'll start with the feet. So we'll work our way into those muscles, the larger muscles. Your feet have also worked really hard, but they're a little bit smaller. So we'll start there with a bit of a toe stretch. You're going to tuck your toes under and reach for your block. So you're going to bring the block between the heels only, really. So between it, and really squeeze the heels. So I'll turn so it's clear. So you're really going to squeeze. So maybe I'll bring this a bit lower. Squeeze in, and then sit down. So what we really want to avoid after you've been running is that you do this. So this will never be good for the leg. Really hug the heels in, and then sit on the toes, and we'll take 10 deep breaths. Back, so sitting, the heels in. If the feet are tender, just sit a little bit further forward if you have the space. And usually if you're a runner, you have pretty strong feet anyway, so you can sit back. There's always that temptation, after a run to get into a really deep stretch, and that's not necessary. The muscles have contracted a lot to support the body, and we don't need to undo that or something. We just want to open up the body after a workout or a run, that we're not tight the next day. So a few more deep breaths. And then release the feet. So I'm just going to stretch the front of one ankle at a time. I'm going to fold one foot forward and sit down inside. So my heel is just on the outside, and I'll hold here, foot on the floor. And we're paying attention, right? That the heel stays close to the center line. It's not flipping out. My big toe, my pinky are on the floor. Few more deep breaths. And then just switch. You can come forward, tap out the feet and the ankles. And then at the top of one shin bone on the floor, slide the foot forward. So as we're sitting back, no tipping. So you're sitting down, just inside the heel. Don't force your hip to come to the floor. You can always support yourself with your hands, or bring blocks under the hands if you need to. Few more deep breaths. Okay, so swing the feet around. Start with a little bit of hip and lower back stretches. So your legs have done the most work, but of course everything above is working with it. So we're going to bring the outside of one hip to the floor, inside of the other. At first, just a twist. Bring the hand to the side of the knee. Inhale at the chest. Exhale, look over the shoulder. And then turn your body back so it's a little bit further forward. So now this hip. So we're going to move the hip back. So here you can see that I'm pulling the hip back and then forward. The hip can roll a lot. You can pull it back, even if the knee lifts, that's fine. And then forward. Especially if you were running, right? The hip was moving a lot in the socket, and the muscles had to support the hip, which is what they're supposed to do when you run. But now we want to work our way out of that a little bit. So you're going to pull the hip first back, which normally after a run is going to be more intense. Back, 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 until the back hip is on the floor, and then stretch the leg forward with the toes pointing toward the ceiling. So you can adjust the knee. Some of you will have the knee here, so sort of this is almost 90 degrees. Some of you, if you have tighter quadriceps, are going to have the knee further forward. What we're looking for is that the hips are both connecting to the mat. So we don't want to slide the hip or the knee back and lose the hip or the rotation of the leg. So look at your foot, your toes should be able to point toward the ceiling. And to begin, we're not coming into a deep hamstring stretch. You'll feel it won't be nice actually to move into a deep stretch. So even leaning like 3, 4, 5 centimeters further forward can feel like a deep stretch here. That's fine. Engage the quadricep just a little bit. Engage the quadricep so that the knee is supported. Take 5 deep breaths. And then back. Also, again, not a deep stretch. So now we want to feel that the hips can move like this, and we're going to start with the low back. So move, 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 move. If the knee is going to lift, stop. And then just bring your hands to the floor wherever that is. The rotation of the opposite leg stays the same. You might need to adjust to the foot a little bit. And then lean forward, bring this leg now into the reclining pigeon pose. So you're going to bring the leg all the way around, slide onto the back, wrap the arms through, and take about 10 deep breaths. We repeat in this little series a lot of the same positions. So again, don't feel like this is your only chance to stretch the hip or something. We'll repeat. So come to that edge where you feel a good stretch, but you're not forcing anything. We're gradually undoing the contraction of the workout. So 5 more deep breaths. And then just bring your knees to your chest. So you can bring your knees to the chest, roll a few times side to side. And then drop your knees over to the left. Palms are out. Stay tight, so your knees are close to the chest. Come all the way around. Pull. This is an active twist, not a passive twist, so really pull the shoulder toward the floor and squeeze this knee down. You can even use your hand if you need to. 5 deep breaths. And then just roll over. So roll over, we'll come to the other side. So now you have, starting on the other hip, twist, bring one hand to the knee. So here the hip can lift. If it's off the floor for the twist, that's totally fine. We're thinking more about the lower back here. then untwist, make a quarter turn, and again feel what this hip is doing. Can be a little bit different side to side, but usually you feel that you can roll forward on the hip and back, and the front knee might move a little bit as well. And then pull, pull, pull the hip to the floor. So now we're like really sitting on the hips, even if your front knee has lifted this much. And then just straighten the legs and respect wherever the leg falls. No need to force it into any shape. It just depends how your hip actually fits into the hip socket. Rotate the leg up. So if your foot is like this, really pull it in here. And this is a supported forward fold. So our abdominal muscles are pulling in up before we come forward. And it can be like a tiny forward fold, and we already feel the stretch in the hamstring. And then onto the back. So moving again from the hips, that we feel that the hips are moving on the legs. So tipping, tipping, tipping. And if this knee is going to lift, then we just bring the hands behind the back. Some of you might be all the way on the elbows. As long as the knee is on the floor and the other toes are facing the ceiling, that's also fine. So it's up to you. And then swing the leg around. So coming again to your pigeon pose. I'll turn like this. So coming onto the back. Hips should be straight. So sometimes if you've been running a long time, your knee might point more this way than that way, and that's totally fine. You want to keep the lower back straight as you hold the back of the right leg. Five more deep breaths. Just bring the legs close together. And then you're staying in this tight position as you bring the knees over now to the right. And the left shoulder, if it lifts, you try to pull back. So you're using your abdominal muscles. You can press down with the right hand if you need to. So active twist, pulling the body in opposite directions. 5 deep breaths. Roll over to the side. So now we will get into some deeper stretches. We've already addressed each body part in a bit lighter ways. So we'll start with the lunge. I'm going to bring, actually I'll bring a jelly. So feel free to grab the blocks for your hands should you need them. So we'll start with the classic lunge, right foot forward. So a few things about the lunge and what you want to do if you're a runner. So if you start in a smaller position, so here I have both legs sort of at 90 degrees. The most useful stretch for a runner is really going to be to find this stretch here in the hip flexor. So you can take a look at your belly and lower back, ladies, women, ladies. Women tend to have a little bit more lordosis, so which is just to say more curve in the lower back, and we want to really not to change that per se, but to be aware of the curve in the lower back. So you want to get that glute muscle to work. That's why in the pre-workout series we were looking a lot at the glute muscle, because this is supporting the front of your hip actually. That the glute muscle is really supporting the hip. So some of you will already feel here that if we really use the glute muscle, we already have a stretch in the front of the quadricep, and we don't need to go so low. So this first one here is really starting from the belly pulling in, hip pulling forward, stretching the quadricep and the hip flexor. So this is a more active posture. And then we'll go into a second type of lunge that is more geared actually on the front hip. So both hips, or both stretches I find useful actually post-workout. So we're actually going to stay in this small shape and come pretty low with the knee. So some of you, if the heel has lifted a lot, you're going to come into a bigger shape. But there's this sort of myth in yoga that the knee always needs to stay above the ankle, and actually that's not true. For one, everyone's ankle is a little bit different, and especially you as a runner, if you're running outside, you know that surfaces are uneven, and sometimes your foot hits a spot where the heel comes a bit lower than the foot. So if you already have strong feet, strong, mobile, flexible feet, that your knee can come ahead of the toe, then in those moments when you hit like uneven ground, your knees will be more supported if your foot is capable of navigating that kind of terrain. So actually, runners, I would suggest doing this as well, so that you have lots of ankle mobility. And what is a healthy stretch here? It's that you can keep the heel pressing into the floor, so no lifting. You don't lose that engagement in the back part of the foot, and just guiding the knee over the toe. Past the toe is probably not helpful, but here, so we have more curve in the lower back, that's fine. We really want to focus on this front hip, front ankle. So hold 5 more deep breaths. And you'll feel also that gripping action of the toes that I talk about it in the pre-workout video as well. Here we're shifting a lot of work into that front arch. Okay, so now we'll come out of it and turn 90 degrees. So I'm going to pivot first on the back. So now if you're using a mat, you're facing the side of the mat. Go, go, go. And we're going to keep the foot working, even though you just did a workout. So the foot is still working, it's flat on the floor, it's not like this or something, it's flat on the floor. Just come onto the elbows, can move around. And then find a position you can hold, so it can be on the elbows. Some of you can maybe sit. Just try not to lift the toes too much here, and take about 10 deep breaths. Come forward, so you're back in the table position, and now twist. So even though it's mostly focused on the legs, also a lower back. So this is left knee, left hand, inhale, arm up, and exhale, twist. Try to get your shoulder all the way to the floor. And if you feel like, okay, how does that work? Sometimes it's just a matter of where your shoulder lands. So if it lands here, that's not going to be possible. Might need to cross the body a lot more. You'll have to play with it. Might need to come closer to the body. 2 more deep breaths. Pull your arm out. So from this shape, our last one is where we're going to maybe walk the foot forward and now bring the toes up. Keep the hip over the knee and just a little side stretch. So 5 deep breaths. You'll feel the stretch in the side of the hip probably more than the inside of the leg. And then bring it in. So we'll do the same on the other side. Feel free to move the spine a bit between sides. I'm very much a fan of circular movements after static stretches. So then, left foot forward. Starting from your shorter lunge. So yeah, most of you, 90 degrees each leg, and really finding this scooping action from the lower pelvis. So check in, find a mirror if you have one, that's even better, that you not necessarily flatten the curve of the lower back, but that you feel that if you pull from the lower belly, so it's this pulling action in, and the hip pressing forward, that we have this stretch down the whole front of the leg. And usually you don't need to push the hips forward, you really just need to contract this glute muscle, contract the lower belly, and you'll find the stretch. So let's take 5 more deep breaths. If you have more range of motion, you might also be able to slide the hips forward, but that's not really necessary. More this supported action in the pelvis. And then we will let that go. So you can only hold it so long, and then it's also good to let it go. Stay in a similar shape, maybe a little bit longer, and just find that end range of motion. So without forcing, where you can come into a really deep lunge, almost where the heel could lift, but not quite. Your hands could stay on the floor. They could be on the knee. I personally find it more comfortable to have the hands on the floor, but really looking for that range of motion in the foot and the ankle. And as you hold this, because we'll hold it almost 1 minute, you'll feel the arch of the foot working as well. So we're stretching the ankle and the calf. We're bringing the knee and the ankle both into reasonably sharp angles. But if we can stay supported in these stronger angles, and then we'll also be stronger if we go through quick movements. It can be running, it could also be something like Zumba, where you step side to side, even just walking around in nature, that if you get into some uneven part, your foot is able to work with the shape and find that springing action that the arches of the feet need to do. So now we're just turning to the side. So I'm pivoting, I'm going to bring the foot around. I keep the whole foot on the floor. Elbows all the way down. I can shimmy. And then sit back. Coming into the twist, lift your head. Inhale, left arm up, and then come into the twist. 5 deep breaths. And then inhale to come up, and now you can bring the hip all the way forward, and now lift the foot. Maybe adjust the foot forward, starting with the hip, bending to the side. And then again, pulling it in. So you can just pause on the knees, roll the back again. And then swing the legs in front of you, have the belt nearby. You can perfectly do seated stretches for the hamstring after a run, but you'll feel actually the most balanced stretch will be a supported position on the back. So you can slide to the center of your mat, bring your right foot in the air. And here you have to be honest with yourself. If you have a tighter hip, I wouldn't stretch out the leg. The stretch is most therapeutic if the lower back is supported by the mat. So your toes are pointing toward your face. Use the quadricep even if you're tired, even if you did like 110% run. Use the quadricep so you can kick the heel up and then bring the foot closer to your chest. And this pose looks so different. For some people, the foot is really low. So if you have a shape like this, there's no shame in that. It's much more important that the lower back is supported, and over time, you'll have more range of motion here. I know some yogis can bring their foot almost above their head, so it just is what it is. You want to feel supported in this stretch. Your body has its own wisdom, and if we push outside of the range of motion, it will actually contract more. That's why I also recommend not doing the deepest stretch ever after a run. Think of this more like a moderate stretch, just like, preventative medicine, that you're not tight tomorrow. Not the deepest stretch ever. Stretching the body is also producing a lot of work for the body. So if you do a workout and really give a lot of energy to the workout, that uses a lot of energy, and if we throw a bunch of deep stretches on top, it can be aggravating, not to everyone, but it can be aggravating to the nervous system to really push the body in so many ways in one day. So this, think of this as like a massage. It should feel just really nice. Five more deep breaths. And then just lower the leg. You can shake it out a little bit. And then come back to your reclining pigeon. So we're doing this a second time, just 5 deep breaths. But you'll feel now a difference after we did the lunges. Come back, reclining pigeon, bring the arm through. And then let it go. Reach in for the strap. And then bring the left foot up. So again, feel free, start with the foot a bit lower. And it's not about even like today there's always tomorrow, right? Sometimes our tissues take years to open up. So if you start moderately, you'll probably notice a difference of like 1 centimeter over the course of a minute. But over time, right, these postures really take time, and your tissues are always changing. Even as you get older, the tissues are always adapting, actually. Just at a slower rate when we're a little bit older. They're always pliable to work with. And if we're patient, actually, with the natural pace of the body, can be age, but it can also just be how genetically we're built, that if we give ourselves time to work through it, well, the body, again, has its own intelligence. It will get there the way that it is meant to. And those of you, if you really want to, stretch out the leg. But as long as both legs are pushing out, that's really key. That the bottom leg is not just sleeping, it is really like pushing out. So 5 more deep breaths. And then move the strap to the side. And last time, with the pigeon pose, cross the left ankle over the right knee, lift the legs up, 5 deep breaths. Let it go. Take any last movements you need to do before Shavasana. So if there are stretches you normally do after a run that I didn't include, go for it. You could rest in the Supta Baddha Konasana, that's a pose I often like. If that's too strong, find a supported position, maybe bring blocks or pillows under the knees. It will be nice probably to support the legs after a workout. And then rest here as long as you like. Flat on the back. Thank you for your practice. Namaste.